intrigues me. We've had some conversations about autism on the Neil Haley Show last couple of months, and I bring it up in different forms to bring back a little of my background before I introduce my guest, to understand my background, to have this conversation and being more qualified than a lot of talk show hosts all over the world, is the fact that I used to be a school teacher. I used to represent families with IEPs, especially with autism. And I also was a BSc and a TSS. And so I have a really big background involving autism. And our guest today is Dinesh Danny, and he's the author of Autism Causes Unveiled. And Dinesh, thanks for stopping by. And you know what's interesting when we kind of go into this process is that your findings are going to be really interesting. And before I even ask the question, so basically it's unveiled. What you're seeing in this is the hidden traumatic brain injury at birth causing the autism epidemic. So this is really new research, and I recommend a lot of people to check this out, especially the huge autism community that are all over the world. Dinesh, but how did this start with you?
Hello, Neil. Yeah, thanks for having me. So this all started when, I have two boys. They're all diagnosed they're both diagnosed with autism. They're now 18 and 16. So I've been around autism for a while now. And basically, this revealing moment of exactly why they got their autism, where they got it from, came when a neurologist had ordered an MRI scan for my second boy. And you typically don't get to see these MRI scans. It goes directly to the doctor's office, and the doctor tells you, what it is. But this time, I got my hands on the report because I was the one picking it up from the hospital, taking it to the doctor's office. And what I noticed was it showed scarring, in the white matter of the brain of my second boy. How do you ever end up with scarring in the white matter? White matter is situated deep inside the brain. It's gray matter is on the outside and white matter is inside. It's really made up of the tails of the neuron cell that connect all cells to everything else. So it's really situated deep in the brain. And the only time when this can happen is when the baby is coming out of the mother head first during birth. So that's where I figured, oh boy, this was something that happened at birth. And wow, what is it? So that prompted me to get into this investigation, started doing research on exactly what happened. And they were put through a prolonged labor induction process during birth, both of my boys. They were induced. My wife was post-dated, 40 weeks of the healthiest pregnancy possible. And 40th week, there's no pains, no nothing, of no signs of contractions. And the doctor suggested we go through this safe and natural process of labor induction, of inducing labor. We said, all right, we'll do that. That's what the doctor's saying. But then we were put through what we realize now is like really prolonged labor induction. Labor induction is safe up to a certain point. Now, what you're really doing is like you're deploying contractions to open up the cervix of the mother. The way birth happens is like you dilate that cervix from 0 centimeters to 10 centimeters. And then that's the first stage of labor with the contractions. With the contractions really are forcing the baby's head against the cervix wall and opening it up, over time. It's supposed to happen naturally, but in a lot of moms, they are really not ready to deliver at 40 weeks. They can carry that pregnancy. So it was a perfectly healthy pregnancy, my wife could have potentially carried that pregnancy to 45 weeks, if you left her, left the natural process take its course. But instead, there was this intervention that we went through where we were trying to speed up the process, obviously, of birth, and interfered with the natural process. And what happened was the boys had been subjected to excessive contractions. And those excessive contractions, they really, when you're deploying excessive contractions to open up the cervix, that's really pounding that brain in place. It's really, those contractions are, high force contractions. Particularly when you use labor and delivery drug, the contractions are even more extreme. That's been the observation of a lot of research out there. So there's stronger contractions, literally hammering the baby out, but pounding the brain in place in the process. And the brain has nowhere to go at that point.
Yeah.
They claim it's the consistency of butter, and it really, the brain, and it doesn't get damaged. But then there's all these fine neuronal fibers that connect the various parts of the brain. The cabling that is there within the brain, and those cables, that wiring, gets severed. It's like disconnected. So autism is typically described as a disconnected brain.
Right.
And
so after you kind of figured this out from your research,
right,
how many people looked at you like, why hasn't the study come out before? What is this?
So it happens that the obstetric community, for example, they have been aware of it for a while, and that's why they had protocols in place. Somewhere in the Pitocin, as for elective labor induction, was introduced in 1980. What happened then was it was this glorious new medication that allowed obstetricians to control that uterus during birth. It was this magical new drug that allowed complete obstetric control of the uterus during birth.
Yeah.
But it came with these brain damage warnings. And nobody realized that this could even happen. And somewhere in the mid-90s, the obstetric community figured that, oh boy, this could cause brain damage. And so they instituted protocols in hospitals to make sure that you don't cross a certain number of contractions. At that point, when you cross this threshold, they are supposed to call the induction a failure and resort to a C-section. So I've spoken to a lot of parents where, they were put through labor induction, and at some point, the doctor said, we got to do a section. There's no other way out, because, the baby could get. What they didn't tell you is if we don't do that, it could cause brain damage to the baby. Proceeding further can cause brain damage to the baby. So in the mid-90s, this protocol was put in place. Unfortunately, something happened in 2018 that changed that whole world upside down. There was another study, an ARRIVE trial, what's called the ARRIVE trial. And this was from a different obstetric organization. They were looking at, can we induce labor at 39 weeks rather than 40 weeks? So what they were trying to do is intervene even earlier during the birth process in an attempt to apparently avoid complications that tend to occur later on during a pregnancy.
Right.
So they were essentially putting this template of care, which applying that to the entire population, where some mothers tend to be premature, attempt to have a baby, and they have what is called incompetent uterus, and so they deliver premature. And then there's some others that have a non-compliant uterus, so that they can carry that pregnancy for 44, 45 weeks without a problem, and then still deliver a healthy baby. But then when this standard template is applied to them, it can cause brain damage. But that study, the Arrive trial, did not really look at that. They
No.
were only looking at neonatal mortality. So
Oh,
essentially, if a baby is alive for a week after birth, then he counts as,
Right.
a healthy delivery, and that's
Oh,
all they
man.
care about. Yeah. Unfortunately, traumatic brain injury in this case is not perceived by the fetal monitors. The monitors cannot detect that there is brain damage happening during the labor induction process. Actually, it's
Right.
happening, but then there's no signaling from the fetal monitors. They are only designed for detecting hypoxia.
Right.
And so oxygen deprivation in the baby, but not really brain damage from trauma, forced trauma. The brain is a
Studies
unique
come
organ,
out.
right?
All right. Yeah, when new studies come out or new things come out, there are a lot of people who come after you. Have you had people come after you since you've written the book?
I've had parents come and say, yes, we know this was it all along. I have not been, I guess, that active on social media. There is people on social media that don't want to hear about this ever. I've been kicked out of Facebook groups, for example.
Yes.
Entire
Yes. So there you go. So if we asked AI right now, your research, we took just a part in AI, AI would debunk you, wouldn't they?
Right. AI would say this is not the accepted body of knowledge out there.
I mean, it makes so much sense compared to some of the other theories.
Right. And that is really the truth. Unfortunately, what is happening is doctors are not allowed to come out with this truth because all this counts as birth injury. And once something is deemed a birth injury, there is litigation involved. There is malpractice insurance involved. It's an expensive ordeal at that point. And there is forces, obviously vested interests, that don't want this out there.
Never.
So they'll be spending tons of money on social media managing that messaging. That's literally what's going on in there. You go try. I've tried telling this online and drawn a lot of flack for it. But
So that's what I was thinking, Dinesh, is that you are going through that. Now, so that was my first question. So that hits you like, okay, I'm glad, because my background in the autism community, I could see a lot of people saying, I'm interested in this. But what have you gotten other people that have seen your research and are saying this is right? Do you have some advocates on your side that are in the research community for autism?
Not yet. Unfortunately, all the research is done by hospitals, malpractice insurance companies. They sponsor their own research mainly to prove that autism is genetic. That's the other part of it, and I go through that.
So you don't believe autism's genetic?
Autism is simply not genetic. It is brain damage at birth. There is like a 10% component where there are some known genetic diseases where the subjects or the patients have an autism diagnosis, but that's a diagnosis because those genetic diseases have a certain level of neuronal impairment
Right.
associated with them. But most people or kids diagnosed with autism don't have anything genetic going on. It's predominantly, 50 to 60% is labor induction. And then there is other hypoxic conditions that can be accentuated by labor induction, actually. Like, things like premature birth, C-section have been pointed out. And that's, again, hypoxia because the lungs is not ready for that air breathing environment. So there's like hypoxia happening earlier in life that is causing complications in certain cases. Mostly respiratory distress caused by infections. They are susceptible to infections. Kids that have been through a C-section are susceptible to infections. Same way, premature birth. Again, their lungs is not ready, and they are susceptible to respiratory infections and respiratory distress, and that leads to oxygen deprivation, hypoxia to the brain, and autism diagnosis later because of the brain damage from the hypoxia. So there is cases like that. So it's truly multifactorial, but labor induction contributes 50 to 60% in all the data that I've collected about this whole causation argument. So
Yeah, and that the causation argument's the big thing, right? It's like, why are we having this argument? And so you've not been able to. I think your goal is, because I really think this makes sense. Have you had people in the autism community that are not researchers back what you're doing and say, we want to get further research on this?
Absolutely. There have been people that are looking at it, but unfortunately, causation being this, it's been made such a controversial subject, that it's hard to find research dollars for autism causation. You can get funded for things like treatments for autism, but nothing around causation, simply because there's this vast lobby that is against pointing at anything except genetics when it comes to autism. And unfortunately, even RFK Jr. found out the hard way that pointing at genetics is the only allowed thing. He tried to pointed at Tylenol, although he understood that it was birth interventions that were causing it. And if you looked at the sound bites from some of the cabinet meetings the secretary was having, he was saying that it was interventions that are causing autism. And then he changed the tune to suddenly reverse that and say it was Tylenol, and then backed out again once the Texas Auditor General ended up suing Tylenol, the Tylenol maker, for causing autism. So the government, the state government, came after the Tylenol manufacturer, and then he quickly reversed his statement. So what he truly figured that anything outside of genetics is not allowed, and there are deep pockets behind supporting all this.
Yeah, and that's the situation we're dealing with. Now, have you gotten a chance to reach out to RFK Jr. or anything? What people would you say in the higher ups can keep this moving to get more and more people to look at birth rates and understanding birth and understanding the dangers that are happening, so that the autism will decrease, the number of diagnoses versus continue to increase?
Right. I did send my book to the health secretary, RFK. And I believe when he said interventions, were causing autism. He had really discovered my book. I actually have a prior book from 2021. I just released Autism Causes Unveiled in August of this year. But back in June, July, I believe they did see my prior book, and that's what prompted them to say that interventions were causing autism, and then they changed their stance after that. So I am not sure what happened. What lobby forced them to say this. Maybe they were afraid of a lawsuit Armageddon. It's like, if I say that, put it that way, it's just that they were probably warned against a flurry of lawsuits that could bring down the healthcare system. We don't know
Right.
what it really was, but I believe they understand that this is happening, and maybe they're working behind the scenes to do something about it. But at this point, for the people out there in general, what really is the risk is, after 2018, the protocol that existed to keep labor induction safe no longer exists.
Oh no.
So right now,
That's because they don't want as many C-sections, right?
yes. So they said C-sections are a problem. C-sections, and that's why they said, let's go ahead and induce all the way to natural delivery. But then inducing all the way to natural delivery is causing brain damage, undetected brain damage, and they are not able to do anything about it. They know they can get away with it. Unfortunately, they can and blame it on genetics. So it's big risk. There's this Pitocin drug that has a brain damage warning on its label, and it's not being used in hospitals as per the labeling. So that's the biggest risk out there that I'm trying to raise awareness and say that, hey, if you're put through a labor induction, it's really not needed. It's an unnecessary intervention. If the mom has had a healthy pregnancy, then let her continue the pregnancy for 42, 43 weeks, however long the baby takes to come out. There is no need to box people into a C-section, basically, if you do it earlier. And that's something they want to avoid. So they go ahead and induce, and you don't see this brain damage until the baby's, year and a half to 2 years old. The signs are there even right from birth. They're slow developing and all that. But what parents really notice is the retrogression of skills after the vaccines. And that's another topic, right? So, and retrogression of skills happens after vaccinations, happens only to kids that have sustained prior brain damage.
Right.
If you have sustained prior brain damage, then you have a damaged blood-brain barrier, and live viruses have a field day getting into the immune privileged areas of the brain, areas of the brain that they should not get into. And that's what's causing those retrogression of skills after vaccines. So vaccines, while they're not causing autism, they are making it worse, making the symptoms worse, which parents tend to notice. Noticeable retrogression of skills after vaccines. So,
Okay. So tell us about your other book.
Oh, the previous book I had published in 2021. It's called Autism Answers in Action. And that one, I wasn't aware of some of the things that happened in 2018 and the change in standard of care and everything else. And so that's why I did the second book, which was an improvement on the prior knowledge that I had. And that first book was a game changer itself, and the second book really incorporates a lot more knowledge on the legal aspects of it. Now, because the standard of care has shifted since 2018, I can go and do a legal case for birth injury. I can file a case in court for birth injury simply because I can't go and say that, okay, this doctor did not follow a protocol, because the protocol itself got thrown out the window, in 2018. So I cannot get an obstetric witness. The court listens to the expert witness, right? So I cannot get an expert witness who needs to be an obstetrician to come and say that the doctor did not follow protocol. So that's the legal feedback loop that has been totally compromised by this change that happened to the standard of care in 2018.
No, it has, and it's wild to think about in so many ways how the standard of care has changed. I guess your whole hope is people that read this book will start making a movement, the large autism community, to ask for change, to really start to build more research out regarding labor and how the labor leads to autism, and to get more and more people behind this. That's the goal by buying the book, right?
Right. And I have an autism organization, a nonprofit called the Autism Parents Initiative, with the goal of, cataloging all the possible causes of autism and, collect that birth data, which, the CDC doesn't have it. They have 4 different studies going on about autism, but, they're collecting information about autism and nothing about the birth data in any of those CDC research programs. So it's like, wow, what's the point, right? They're collecting data about pregnancy and then and about the child after he was born, but nothing in that critical birth process, which has historically been the cause of, mental issues, even before 1980, before labor induction. The predominant cause was hypoxic injury, and that comes from physician notes back in the 1800s. It's been documented as far back as 1800s. It's if you had a difficult birth, you can get neurological problems, and it's an accepted fact even in courts today. Particularly the hypoxic tract, oxygen deprivation tract, is a known cause of neurological issues. They don't call it autism at that point, simply because they don't want the connection between birth injury and autism. Nobody wants, the people in the powers that be do not want people to make that connection, between birth injury that later gets diagnosed as autism. So that's unfortunate situation. And what I'm trying to do is create a movement with the Autism Parents Initiative to collect that data and prove it out, potentially in courts at some point. Because unless we get some legal action going, there is not going to be a change, any real change.
So what would you say needs to, so how much research will be needed for something like this?
The research already exists for the most part, because the label, the Pitocin label clearly states that, this, beyond a certain point, this drug can cause brain damage from contraction trauma. So it says uterine motility can cause permanent CNS or brain damage, permanent CNS damage. CNS stands for the central nervous system. So that includes the brain and the spinal cord, essentially. But, so it's already there, and they probably have that because they had research when they approved the drug. The FDA approved the drug. They know that this is a possibility. So all that needs to be done is, it might just come down to proving it in court.
And you're ready, right? You're ready to do that if it has to go to court. But you need donations too for the organization, right? To make it happen.
Right. So we do need support from legal institutions if we can, and supporters who want this change to happen, who would like to end the autism epidemic as we know it. We know the cause, we understand the reasons behind it. It's just that we got to take on some really powerful interests that are working against us at this point.
No doubt. Not easy.
Yes.
That's for sure. But you're on your way. You're getting there.
I am getting there. We will get this done sooner or later.
I believe it. And there's a lot of work to be done. And especially the passion as you being a parent yourself, that you, with autistic children, you feel this mission that you have.
Yes, this is my life's mission at this point, because I have this personal interest of 2 kids on the spectrum, and I don't want this to happen to other parents. We want to make their condition meaningful. Maybe the world will learn from from what they've been through. So I have this unique proof of brain damage in my second son. It's typically not seen in MRIs as well. This was a special case where my boy did not go through any pushing. He was the second boy. He was a smaller baby, and he did not have to go through any pushing. What happens? Is the brain damage gets hidden when pushing is involved. Essentially, the damage happens by the contractions, and then when the head molds, takes a conical shape coming through the birth canal. The scars from the damage get redistributed, and nothing is seen in the MRI of a lot of these kids. That's why I'm calling it my book is called The Hidden, Autism Causes Unveiled, the hidden traumatic brain injury causing the autism epidemic. Simply because the damage gets hidden by the birth process itself.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we appreciate it. Best place we can purchase the book and learn more about you. Where can we go?
The book is available on Amazon at this time. Available in all countries where Amazon distributes books. And it's on Kindle, Kindle Unlimited. It's free on Kindle Unlimited. It's only a couple of bucks on Kindle, simply because I want people to go there and read this book. It's about the cause, not about making money off of a book. So we're giving it away at $2 on Kindle, and we are going to get it in bookstores too at some point here.
Oh, I know you're going to get there. I really applaud you with your research, and as a parent fighting for not just your children, but anyone else that could end up getting autism from birth. So I appreciate it, sir, and thanks for stopping by.
Thank you so much for having me, Neil. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.